Yeah, there's supposed to be. I just don't. Okay, good. I was just like, yeah, no, there's supposed to be. So.
(6:30) and then we'll just start when we start.
Okay. Right. Yeah, those are pretty. No, it was not.
Testing.
Hear you. Angela, can you hear me? I don't think it's working. Hey,
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
Talking in it. Hi, everyone. Thank you for those who have joined us on time here. We're going to allow a few more minutes for people to walk in with an idealized start time of 6:35 p.m. So we'll plan to start by then. Thank you. Also, the pizza has arrived in the back, so just get them a minute to set it up and then feel free to go grab a slice before the meeting begins. Huh? Pizza? Yeah, good.
Really good. Yeah. And you guys. And we actually have a lot of out of state people. Or those from Yale University.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
We say, Betsy in a box, you don't have to give people. Because we have lots of. Whole box, you have you guys. Where you're sitting?
Where's it?
You're behind me.
Yeah.
If everyone could start making their way back to their seats, I'm gonna go ahead and wait until the line back there is finished for like pizza to be gotten, but then we'll go ahead and get the meeting started here.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. I am now going to officially call cycle 12 student assembly meeting to order. First, I'm going to seek a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting. I see a motion from Chris. I see a second from Blake. Is there anyone who objects to moving towards a vote to approve the minutes of our last meeting? All right, seeing no objections, we'll get that poll posted in the Students Assembly channel. Reminder, this will be the first attendance vote of the evening. All right, that's now been posted in the Students Assembly channel. Do you agree with the cycle 11 minutes? Yes, if you agree, no, if you believe you have an objection to it, and abstain to stay out of the discussion. I'll let that run for about a minute here or so. A reminder, our quorum is 30 for this meeting. Is there anyone who has not voted on this matter that has the ability to do so? All right, I'm seeing a couple of people, so I'll allow 30 more seconds. Please get those votes in promptly. If you're having any Teams issues, please connect with us up here. Are we good in the back? Awesome. Are you good up here? No?
Yes.
Yes. Well, we can check and see if you're on the roster. What's the issue?
It's not loading. Yeah, same for me.
Do we have those votes? Okay. Yeah, so we can just do some vocal votes. So Blake, what's your vote? Yes. Nicole, did you have an issue as well? Perfect. And Luke? Yes. All right. And then your last name Lechtenberg, right? Perfect. All right. I will go ahead and get this closed. And with a vote of 37 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, this motion clearly passes. All right, and I see a motion from Danae.
Yeah, I'd like to motion to introduce our guest speaker for the evening, Justice Krause. He's a U.S. District Judge, and he was also the formal Solicitor General for the state of Kansas.
Brilliant. I see a second from Kevin. Is there anyone who objects to this guest speaker? I certainly hope not. All right, well, seeing none, that amendment to the agenda is approved. And so I imagine it's the next item, correct? All right, so we'll go to that item on our agenda, and you may come up and speak to us here. Yes. And you'll have about 20 minutes and then like time for Q&A. Is that all right?
I will do whatever you tell me to do. And can you hear me?
Amazing.
Good. So I'm happy to talk for as little or as long as you want. I've got nothing necessarily prepared. A couple of things that I was asked to consider talking about is kind of who I am, how I got here and things like that. Happy to share that. And also maybe ideas and thoughts on how to deal with interpersonal conflict, left, right, things like that. As you'll find out soon, I was appointed by President Trump, who people have strong feelings about pro and con. So I've dealt with my share of those things. So, but that's what I'm going to talk about. If you guys have something else that you wanted me to talk about or throw something at me, please feel free to do so. Thank you very much for inviting me, Danae. Really appreciate it. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I attended law school from the summer of 1997 through May of 2000. My wife and I both graduated. I'm a Central Kansas kid, grew up to first generation college, went to the other state university. So my heart bleeds purple, but don't throw things at me. If you see anybody burning a truck in the parking lot, it's probably my K-State emblazoned truck. So I went to K-State, but both my wife and I did, and we got into KU. And I actually, tying it to you all, my wife was a member of the Kansas State Senate, or the Kansas State Student Senate, whatever it was. And so she was the smart person of the group, and I was the kid who was probably at the bar drinking before they should have and not studying. So, we both made it into law school, so much so that I think I got rejected at KU Law School because my grades and my test scores weren't the greatest. And about 3 days before my graduation at K-State, I got a call from the university that said, hey, we waitlisted you, but if you show up, we'd like to admit you. I'm like, great, when do you want me there? And they said Monday, which was, 2 days after I graduated. So I was like, okay. I came up and found a job, or found a place to live, and went to law school. And unlike my first 22 years of education, I actually loved law school. I made a joke to several people tonight, don't go to law school, it's terrible. It's not because law school is not fun. Law school was awesome in my estimation. I would go back in a heartbeat. I love law school. It's the being a lawyer on a daily basis that isn't sometimes the greatest. Speaking of dealing with conflict, sometimes it's contrived conflict that you have to deal with. So left there, clerk for a federal district court judge in Wichita, Kansas, former KU alum, proud KU alum. He first gave me a little bronze Jayhawk that I still have for my first Christmas when I was with him. So he was terrific. Then I clerked for Judge Mary Beck Briscoe here in Lawrence, actually. Also another proud KU alum. And then I went to work for a couple of law firms in Kansas City. And let's see, kind of winding up. So I clerked or worked there. And then Dean McAllister at the law school was appointed to be U.S. attorney. I told him he was crazy because he had the best job as the Kansas Solicitor General. He would teach at the law school, make gobs of money. He would work private practice, make gobs of money. And then he would be the Kansas Solicitor General and not make a lot of money, but get to argue U.S. Supreme Court cases, which I thought was the coolest job in the world. So when he told me he wanted to be U.S. attorney, I said, hey, Steve, love you. Think you're stupid. Don't do it. And he said, no, I think you ought to be a district court judge. I said, no, it's a terrible idea. So Steve took my advice and became the U.S. attorney. And because he did, there was an opening in the Kansas Solicitor General. Former Attorney General Derek Schmidt asked me to be his Solicitor General. That required me to leave my very comfortable job at a nice Kansas-based firm. I have a wife, 2 kids. Turns out, so my wife hates lawyers and hates judges, even though she is a lawyer. And she ceased working the day that my daughter was born. So we're a one-income family. And instead of having a comfortable life at a law firm, I said, hey, here's an idea. Let me take a massive pay cut and I'll try to open my own firm and maybe it'll work out. I don't know why she said yes, but she did. So I go become part-time Kansas Solicitor General, and part-time I've got my own private practice because I wasn't going to stay in the SG's office for very long. I figured the general would probably run for what ended up being Senator Marshall's seat. So I was like, listen, I can do this for a year and a half. It'll be fun. Maybe I'll get a chance to argue in the Supreme Court. I was wrong. He didn't run for that spot and then stayed for a while. So when I showed up, there was a cert petition, which is how you get to the U.S. Supreme Court, that Kansas had filed on a case called Kansas versus Garcia. And I'd also heard something about some prisoner case that a prisoner who killed his 2 daughters, his ex-wife and her mother. It's never going to happen. And then maybe 4 months into the thing, there was another case actually out of Lawrence, Kansas versus Glover. That I was like, hey, that's a pretty cool deal. So filed cert petition on that. And within the span of 14 days, I had 3 cert grants and was going to have 3 arguments in the Solicitor General's office. I knew nothing about the Supreme Court. We don't have a big staff. What am I going to do? So I worked like a dog. I think I ended up working every day for north of 10 hours, 7 days a week for probably 6 to 8 months. I forget what it is. It all kind of blends off in the past. Long story short, the general and I argued 3 cases in 26 or 27 days, at the US Supreme Court. I had the first argument on, I think it was October, ballpark at 7. He argued October 16, the Kansas versus Garcia, and then I argued November 4th. Best professional experience of my life. My mom and dad, who are much like me, from the middle of nowhere, went to Washington, DC. I was afraid they were going to get arrested by the Supreme Court police because they don't know where they're at and where they're going. They didn't. So they got to see me argue my first case. And then my wife, who is a lawyer, and my kids came out. And my kids, I made a joke earlier, don't ever have kids because they scare you to death and cost you money and all those things. So my kids at that time were maybe 7 and 10. And if you know anything about 7 and 10-year-olds, they don't sit still, they don't listen, and they have their own mind. So the Supreme Court police are not the most understanding crew. So I've got my kids in there and my wife, who's wonderful and is scary. And so they're going to mind her. So I'm moving for her admission because that's cool to have your kids see their mom get sworn into the Supreme Court and their dad argue. So she was sitting up front. My kids were in the back. And I was like, oh no, this is terrible. So I talked to the clerk's office. I'm like, hey, I need to get my wife back there because those kids are going to get thrown in jail and that's not cool. Turns out that they said, yeah, that's fine. It didn't work out that way. So my kids are sitting by themselves in the Supreme Court. And there are 2 arguments. This is my favorite story of the deal. So there are 2 arguments a morning. I argue, I think it's, so 10 o'clock is the first argument. Unbelievably boring immigration statutory construction case. So my kid, let me back up. My son is a little, he's a terror. So he asked me one day, he goes, hey dad, you know what I'm doing? Like, no, he goes, I'm getting ready for your Supreme Court argument. And I was like, awesome. Thanks, bro. So anyway, so they're back there in the back row and I'm just like, oh, this is terrible. Listening to an hour's worth of argument. It's terrible. Nobody's minding them. And they made it through and I'm getting ready to take my argument. I mean, it's only the second case I've argued. And my kids get up and give me the side wave and all these things. So it was just kind of a cute moment. So they got to see their mom sworn into the Supreme Court and I got to argue. So that was awesome. I'd worked like a dog for a long time, needed kind of a break, but still had a job, still needed to pay bills, things like that. So I was just kind of trolling around, working at the AG's office and doing my thing. And I got a phone call that said, hey, there's a opening in the Kansas District Court bench. I was like, really? When did that happen? They're like, well, about 6 minutes ago. Do you want to do it? And I was like, hey, I'd missed out on the first one. And I was like, I don't know. My wife said no. I didn't listen to her again and eventually got to go to the White House. Much to the chagrin of my kids, I did not get to meet President Trump. The confirmation process is horrific. I'd be happy to talk to you about it more. But as a nominee, like you are nominated, but like you become like a political punching bag for the national political people. Like there's always somebody who wants a bridge over some creek that they're willing to horse trade for you. And I mean, it's just, they're dealing with my life and it was not a pleasant experience. The senators really couldn't tell me anything. My wife was like, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I'm like, I don't know. I lived through, or my nomination lived through COVID. I was actually in DC. I don't know if you guys remember when the Asian stock market tanked that Sunday night. I was in a DC hotel room and I was like, because I was going to the White House the next day. I'm like, oh no, this is terrible. So my nomination went through COVID. It went through a budget deal where they were going to blow up the government. It went through Ginsburg dying. It went through Trump nearly dying. It went through Trump losing an election. And then randomly I got a call like, hey, by the way, you're confirmed. Like, oh, okay. So that's kind of my story as to how I got to where I am. Awesome. I sit in Topeka. That's my duty station. Eventually I'll move back. So I live in Kansas City or the Overland Park area. Drive every day over to Topeka. Eventually when the next nominee comes through, also a KU grad, I hope he gets through. He'll go to Topeka and then I'll get to go back to KCK. My docket is, because I'm in Topeka, probably 95% criminal, drugs and guns mostly, some child sex abuse materials stuff, but I would say 90% of my 95% criminal docket is drugs and guns. 5% civil. Everybody talks about Republican judges, Democratic judges, and everybody fights with each other. just not my deal. For a couple of reasons. One is I'm not that dude. I've got red friends, blue friends. I mean, I'm a K-Stater and a KU grad, right? I've got to get along with people. So, but also because like my job just isn't that interesting on a divisiveness issue, right? I mean, like today, I'm sentencing people for walking away from a residential reentry center, taking a plea for somebody who sold marijuana. I mean, like, you know, my job just isn't that lightning rod. My colleagues, sometimes they will get them, and whether they're sought out or they seek them, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. But as my old boss used to say, it's a really cool job, but at the end of the day, it's just a job and you're just a dude. And so I tend to be a relatively self-effacing person, try to have as much humility as a federal judge can have. That's a jab at all my other federal judge friends. But at the end of the day, like I'm not that important. I don't do that many important things. But, and the other thing is the litigants that are in front of me will probably be the only case that they're in front of me. And it's the most important case they've got. And so I try to give them the best I've got every day. I may not be the smartest or make the best decision in every case, but like at the end of the day, if I can say, hey, I did my best for that guy or girl, you know, they may not agree with it, but at least they got an honest service out of me. So that's kind of my general shtick. Getting to the divisiveness and how to get along. I was talking earlier before the thing, and I don't necessarily understand it. Like I'm a huge advocate for Twitter. I was an early adopter, like in 2000, I was just telling somebody this today. In 2007, Jeff Goodman, who, if you know college basketball recruiting, like he used to have an email where he'd send out like the top recruits news like once a week. And then he said, I'm going to this concept called Twitter. I don't produce tweets, I just consume information. But what I gather from Twitter, and I kind of use it as a news aggregator, what I gather from Twitter is it kind of becomes an echo chamber. And I think that tends to cause people to only listen and hear to what they have to say and ridicule those with whom they disagree in 140 characters or less. And I just don't think that's healthy. So, speaking of K-State and KU, I thought one of the best things that Jerome Tang, the K-State basketball coach, did was he repudiated. Listen, K-State fans are obnoxious. I get it. Okay. He repudiated the K-State fans who would utilize a letter in the alphabet prior to saying KU, which if you are a non-K-Stater coming in with no prior head coaching experience and saying, hey, this is not what we're going to do anymore, that takes guts, because that dude could get run out of town as quickly as he was brought into town. But I think what he's saying is like, listen, like we can be great without denigrating the neighboring school. And so, again, you don't want to hear a K-State basketball coach story, but like I do think that's emblematic of we're all just people, right? I mean, imagine yourself, whether you're sausage or pepperoni pizza, like, is that really the hill you want to die on? If you're in a lifeboat, is that like, if you've got to rely on each other to get together, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? So, I don't know. That's my preachiness. I hate to be a preachy person, but, so the other thing is old guy preachy stuff here. What I wish I could do differently if I had the chance to go back to college and counsel myself in law school is, and it kind of ties into this, is find ways to build relationships with people who I wasn't friends with, whether I wasn't friends with them because I thought they were good, bad, or indifferent, or, you know, they just weren't part of my crew. Like in law school, I was kind of with my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and we kind of hung out with, for lack of a better word, the boring quasi-married people, right? And so there was some like younger, well, same age, but like they would go hang out, but like I wasn't really friends with them. I wish I would have developed at least a relationship with them for a couple of reasons. One is I think my life would be richer to have a greater diversity of experiences and thought processes. And two, and this sounds, and I guess somewhat is a little bit crass, someday you're going to need a job and you're going to go interview and the guy or girl 3 rows ahead of you, 2 seats to the left is going to be that person. And if you're a jackwagon to them today, man, guess what they're going to think, right? And so I preach to my kids on a daily basis. Everyone comes back together, and my wife's student senate friends I see very frequently. And it's not that I'm looking for a job from them, but like, it's just really awkward to be like, oh yeah, that is somebody that was a jackwagon to me. I don't want to be around them. So I just think from a humanistic perspective, finding ways to build relationships with people, you don't have to, I mean, like, if somebody's pro pepperoni and you're anti pepperoni, you don't have to start eating pepperoni. Just find a way to have a human interaction with them is what I would urge and counsel you to do. So there's my preaching. I don't know what my time is, but I want to answer as many questions as I can. So they better be good.
Well, thank you for that. We really do appreciate you taking the time to come speak to us here. I currently have about 3 minutes left for questions, but I can also see just like who in the room has questions currently. So I have Chris and then Camden. All right, so I think we should be able to accomplish that in 3 minutes. So we can go ahead and start with you, Chris, and then go over to you, Camden.
Howdy, so I'm interested.
Is that a microphone? It's pretty cool.
Mhm.
You can tell how old I am. I'm mesmerized.
It's slightly less cool when it's hurtling across you,
Fair.
from across the room.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in attending law school when I'm older.
Okay.
What's something that you really like seeing from attorneys?
So a couple things. Preparation. There is, whether like I'm a Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan dude. Those guys were notorious for preparing and hard work. And I've met a lot of smart people, but there is no shortcut that hard work doesn't resolve. So that's probably step 1. And step 2 is having an appreciation for pragmatic, practical results. One of my best, and again, going back to the notion of getting along, one of my most fun activities was when I was in the AG's office and we were promoting all red state things, was interacting with, like, I've got buddies at the ACLU who were always quasi blue state things, right? And so like you fight like cats and dogs, but like they're cool dudes, right? So I'm not going to go in there flame throwing, that guy's terrible, his ideas are stupid, because you know what, maybe there is some common sense to them. I may want to win, but I've got to find a way, as a pragmatic way, is to couch and approach a problem that isn't just reactionary, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
So yeah.
Sorry, this mic is very sensitive. First off, thank you so much for coming in. I mean, this talk has been
And if I didn't
wonderful.
say thank you for having me.
Oh, no, the pleasure is all ours, I'm sure. So you seem like a balls and strike guy, like of the variety of judge that is, less inclined to participate in the internecine political conflicts of the judiciary. My question for you is, do you perhaps share, I think, the dismay that lots of Americans have about the current reputation of the American judicial system, particularly, the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land? And if you do, what path do you see forward to remove some of the vitriol from the discussions about the top level of the law?
Yeah, so I actually probably am of the minority, and I don't get paid to say this, although we get paid by the same people. I actually don't share any vitriol towards the court. I actually revere and am pretty impressed with the intellectual capacity of everyone on the court. So like I argued, see who is, so Ginsburg has passed, so I argued in front of Ginsburg, so that would have been Barrett, so there would have been no Barrett, and Gorsuch was there, so Kavanaugh. So I had at one point, like I'm in the middle of something and I turned and I had to say something, and I was always going to say I never refer to the justice as Justice Smith or Jones, because I'm going to get it wrong, right? I'm that guy, and so I was always going to say Your Honor. But I was in the middle of something and I turned over and I was like, and Justice Kavanaugh, and I looked up and he wasn't paying attention. He looks up at me like he'd been caught in class not paying attention. I was like, holy cow, I'm talking to Justice Kavanaugh. So Kavanaugh was there. So I've got those crew of folks who were there, and Breyer was still there at that time as well. Every one of them unbelievably brilliant in their own sort of way. So like I'm from a red state place. I always argued red state things. Justice Kagan was appointed by Obama, so you would think, oh, well, she's a lefty and she's this and she's that. I'm telling you what, she's crazy smart. And I don't mean like, yeah, I mean crazy smart. And so her questions, I was most scared of her because she could ask questions around me in circles. Like, she's so good. But like, there wasn't a point at which I would ever think like, oh, well, you're just doing this because you're kind of a sop to the left side of the cabal. Same way with Justice Alito. Like, I don't think that he's going to vote a certain way because he's pro-Republican. I think and what I think is missed in the Twitter sphere is the nuance and the rationale for why they think what they think. So like, the textualists that would disagree, like textualism is a school of methodology that justices would use. Justice Breyer isn't like that. He's an unbelievably practical, pragmatic dude. Like, that's how he approaches legal issues. And that's how, if you read his decisions, sometimes he tends to left, but like, I was in Kansas v. Glover, like, he's a perceived lefty, like Kansas got his vote. Like, I won that case 6-3, not because of politics or who appointed him. It's just where they were on the spectrum. And so, irrespective of which justice you would name, I could point to probably, if you gave me a day, I could probably point to 4 decisions that each of them have made within the last 2 terms that goes different to your point, if that makes sense. So I perceive this more as a optics and a political structure than it is an actual, they are not, in my estimation, activists. Now, my friend and colleague, Dean McAllister, I think was really bothered by at least the Roe v. Wade decision last term. Like, that was probably the first I've known. I call him Steve now because I'm so far out of school. So Steve was kind of who was my mentor and in law school, and was always kind of what I would perceive as kind of a right of center dude. And just the way that happened, and very pro court as an institution. And I heard in his voice for the first time kind of some resignation and some like sadness that he thought the court was going in a direction that was wrong. But as best I could perceive or interpret my friend's view, is it was more like on a policy basis for the result it was, as opposed to maybe doctrinal. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but like, so I'm aware that perception is out there, but I think that it's more on a policy basis of what the results are and how it fits within the recipient's policy preference, as opposed to like legal doctrine, if that makes any sense. And I tend to be more of a doctrinal dude who, whether A or B wins, like, I don't really care about that. I care about kind of what the doctrine looks like. And again, people can accurately and fairly say that you're naive and you're just like them, or whoever them is. Okay, I'm okay with that. But like, I don't sense any separation or lack of functionality of the court, if that makes sense. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions from the assembly? All right, seeing none, we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right, and with that, we will go ahead and advance to the next item on our agenda here, which is our officer reports, starting with our student body president, Sadie Williams. And Sadie, you said you needed 10 minutes for the start?
There's
Okay.
30 minutes to cover.
All righty.
Sorry, y'all. Usually I stay brief.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. So I have quite a few announcements today, so please bear with me. I'm going to try and get through it all, but I wanted the extra time too for any questions as well. So it's kind of why I wanted a little bit more time than usual. So first, The Student Involvement and Leadership Center, so SILC, they do a lot of our advising and things like that. They are currently accepting applications for the non-traditional student scholarships for this coming academic year. So if you're a non-traditional student, which if you all don't know, KU has a definition for it, and it is applied to the scholarship. So it's important to keep in mind. And it's defined as someone who commutes 10 or more miles to the Lawrence campus, has any dependents, including a spouse or children, is a veteran, or is 3 years older than their classmates. An example is like if as a senior, I was like 25. And so those are the current guidelines for non-traditional students. So if you fall within those, that scholarship is open to you. The deadline was originally this Friday. It got extended to April 7th. And that also is funded by Student Senate EOF. And so it is attached to us too, and like what we get to do on campus. So that applies to you. I really encourage you to apply. It's a great opportunity. And SILC does a lot of great work too. Also, Rock Talk Recognition Awards open next week, and those are also facilitated through SILC. And there's individual awards through that. There's also awards for different organizations and student or different registered student organizations. So if you all are part of a student organization and you think that you deserve recognition and for like the achievements that you've been able to accomplish this year, then that could be a great avenue for you all. And again, those open next week, I think on Monday. Also a quick shout out for women's basketball, since they're playing in the Fab Four literally right now. And then hopefully they win, fingers crossed. Us? Okay, yeah. So 13 and 14, so it's looking pretty good. It's Washington. Who does? A little tip for you all to help combat some implicit biases and things in a small but impactful way is anytime that someone asks you or someone tells you, oh, I'm going to the game later or something like that, just be like, oh, like men's or women's. And then they'll correct themselves, and it's like not awkward or anything, but it's a good way to remind them of like, hey, there's men and women's sports at KU, at every university, high school, professional, all that stuff too. So that's a small little way to kind of combat some of those biases that we have in our head. I think it's also kind of fun. So, and then moving forward, in KBOR land this past week, myself and all the other student body presidents that compose the SAC, it's a Students Advisory Council or committee, we presented to the Board of Regents a list of feedback regarding what it means or current enrollment for dual credit concurrent in the state of Kansas. So that largely in high schools, if you all are familiar with it, but we kind of just painted the status quo, what it means for students and all of that. I uploaded that into Teams last Wednesday. And so if you want to access it, it's in the Student Senate Teams. And it just has like basically what it looks like in statutes for concurrent with some recommendations to make concurrent and dual enrollment more accessible in our state. So it's kind of fun. And then moving forward for that, our big project for this last month that we're all going to be on our terms is to kind of paint a portrait of what it looks like to be a student on campus in terms of our rights in an academic sphere. So if you have any thoughts on that and like ways that like maybe in a classroom you felt like your efforts or whatever haven't been protected or anything like that, I'd love to hear about it and include it in those conversations and reports. And so we'll be working on that over this whole next month, and I'd love to hear y'all's feedback. And then once I get a draft too, I'll also post that in Teams for you all as well, but we haven't written anything yet. And then moving forward, our goal is to hopefully get someone from the university here for our last cycle, which is in 2 weeks from now, to speak about what current plans we have in case there is a safety crisis on campus. I know that has been a pressing concern for students for the past decade, and unfortunately it's probably going to continue to be so. And so in our most recent conversation with the provost office, we raised that concern, and we were affirmed both in our concern and also in KU's preparedness on that. They're actually doing an audit right now, but we thought it'd be beneficial to bring that information to you all too. And given that we're probably not the best to speak on it, we thought we'd bring in the people who can. So we're going to really work on getting a speaker in here who ran the audit and can really talk about what it looks like to be a student on KU's campus in those times of crisis. So that way students can be best prepared and also kind of rest a little bit easier too, knowing that our administration, faculty, staff, and students are all aligned in a plan should anything happen. Also continuing to pursue a robust turnover process. Every single week in exec meetings, we have checklists that everyone needs to have done for their turnovers. This should be I think probably the most robust turnover year in Student Senate history, and hopefully people will be able to use our turnover materials for years to come. That's the dream. Further, the election deadlines for senators has been extended. Angela's going to go over more details later and kind of walk you all through how to register or file your candidacy to be a senator. Super easy. She'll walk you through it, but I encourage you all to continue your involvement in Student Senate next year if you're going to still be a student here. for all of its woes, it can be pretty cool. So that's my little plug for you all. Additionally, there's so much. There's a president and vice president debate tomorrow night. It's going to be in this room. It's from 6 to 7:30 p.m. We will have food, some little snacks, and some little like drinks too. I think just like water mostly, but still, it should be good. I think we got lemonade. I'm not really sure, but it's going to be good. The Elections Commission has been really working hard on that. It should be a eventful, productive, and educational evening. So I encourage you all to attend. We got enough food for 30 people. And so I would love it if like at least 30 people came. So we were a little bit ambitious on that in terms of usually like non-Wednesday Senate activities, but I think we'll get there. So I think you all should go. It's only an hour and a half. And then also there is a bill coming later tonight from me that you'll see, and it's codifying just different exec roles. It's basically just, there's some things missing in terms of what what is in the Constitution for what exec should be doing versus what we actually do. So it's like making sure that we streamline that process, include all of the things that are actually part of what we do. And then lastly, how much time do I have? Okay, perfect. That's what I thought. So lastly, and what I want to dedicate the most time to and also answer any questions that you all may have is I have my finalized letter for the KU endowment. So some of you have been around Senate for a while, probably know this. But if you didn't, the student body president every single year is entrusted and has responsibility of carrying out an allocation in coordination with the vice provost of student affairs via an endowment account. And so that account, it depends on the year. It depends on how much of that account the president before spent. But this year I had about $10,000 of money to allocate out to different areas as needed. And so it happens kind of every single spring. And so literally I finished this today with Sarah Bowman, one of my main advisors. So I'm bringing it to you all fresh off the press in the most literal sense. But I kind of wanted to walk you all through that. And so this is, again, through endowment. And so it's kind of really the only money that the student body president or anyone on the executive staff gets a direct say over. And it's only because, like, I don't know if you've noticed, I do not vote. I cannot. So this is kind of my opportunity to allocate a little bit of money, not a ton, but a little bit to some areas that may have not been able to be serviced to the degree in which myself and my running mate campaigned on it in the fall. So the two areas that we focus on this year is we first are giving myself, I guess, is giving $5,613.09 from the endowment fund to the Center for Sexuality and Gender Diversity. A big part of mine and the vice president, I called you by your name, but I wouldn't do dirty like that, campaign last year was to uplift the LGBTQ students and specifically the Center for Sexuality and Gender Diversity. We were hoping to accomplish that in the fee, but as you know, this year that was not a part of the package that was ultimately passed. And so this is just a little way for us to provide that continuity and really kind of like show, like, even though we weren't able to accomplish this, because it's, ultimately it's not up to any one of us what happens with the fee, like I still want to hold true to that promise to the best that I can. And so they are getting allocated that $5,613 towards them. And then the other component of this, and something that also I felt wasn't going to be fulfilled in the regular funding processes in Student Senate, is centered around advocacy. And so, as you know, I don't know if you all are super familiar. I've been bouncing back and forth from Topeka all year, as of many of you. I'm trying to advocate for students and what it means to be a student at KU specifically, what those needs are, and really trying to rebuild a lot of relationships that were lost through COVID. Student Senate used to have a really robust relationship with all of our partners and kind of fell flat. I said a lot of things in the past 3 years. And so that was a huge goal of mine and Alessia's as we're going through this, is rebuilding those relationships, building networks for students to make that change. And so while Topeka is pretty close and pretty easy to access, some of our other avenues aren't. And so ultimately what I decided in coordination with Student Senate advisors and based off of their support is to allocate that towards more so focusing on the federal government. And so the remaining $4,879.84, I have the fortune of being able to use that to help cover the remaining expenses beyond the $5,500 that was allocated in the travel fund to help us get students to DC and really advocate for what it means to be a student at that level too. I know that the state government is accessible and seems like it has the most relevance to what it means to be a student, but the federal government is equally as important, if not more so. And so having that opportunity to really fight for students at the highest level possible is very much so core to my values and core to what I ran on. And I know Alessia as well. And so that is ultimately what drove me to spend that allocation in that way. And so that was kind of the rationale behind it. And I'm presenting it to you all today, not seeking a vote or anything, because it is at the responsibility of the student body president. But just to kind of like let you all know, I also want to note too, this isn't really precedented. Usually the student body president kind of just does it. And so there have been tons of allocations in years past. It looks different every single year. But this is just what I chose to do with my funding based off of the values that I have, the passion that I have for student advocacy and for representing underrepresented students. So that was the kind of breakdown. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Sadie. Are there any questions for the student body president? All right, seeing no questions, thank you very much for your officer report. All right, Camden, if you can take the chair, I'll be going to my officer report.
How long do you want?
2 minutes should be fine. All right, good to go. Perfect. All right, mine definitely won't be as long. I have a couple of announcements in regards to like dates to look up for. I held a student senate orientation yesterday for candidates. We had 2 attendees and covered basically just a summary of what student senate is, how it operates, and a student senator's role in shaping sort of the work that goes on within this organization. Given the attendance, I'm also going to be looking to make that presentation available on the Teams for people to look at when they're looking at like what they need to do for the responsibilities of being a student senator. Joint Senate is officially scheduled for the 26th of April, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. here in Alderson Auditorium. So please save the date for the transition there. We are going to be holding that meeting then, and then the new Senate will officially take office on that date. The University Senate meets tomorrow at 3:15 p.m. and is going to be discussing new academic forgiveness policy, the KU capstone requirements, the reorganization of the University Senate, and ChatGPT in relation to academic misconduct. This is part of a larger program of like what we're doing in the University Senate, in which we're trying to get equitable governance from all different parts of the university in that organization. Not a lot of you might know that the University Senate, the way it's currently organized, is made up of 2/3 faculty and the remainder is like 1/3 students and staff. And so we're looking to make that a more equitable distribution across the 3 different constituent parts of the University Senate, being students, staff, and faculty. For legislation here, please make sure to submit all legislation by 5 p.m. this Friday via the Student Senate website. I wanted to go ahead and go over that as well tonight here. If you have not yet submitted legislation this year, please make sure to submit it to the link to submit legislation section of the Student Senate website. Clicking on this form will open a Rock Chalk Central form where you can submit the Word doc version of your legislation and provide all of the other information that is needed for that submission. And if you are looking for like any templates for submitting legislation, feel free to look at the template section of the website to see any of the bill templates currently available in this section and get any advice on writing bills at that part. Any questions?
Are there any questions for our speaker? Going once, going twice. Okay, you may sit down.
Thank you very much.
It's been fun, y'all. I have to give this back now. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, and now we're on to Holly Hall, our graduate student body president. Holly, how much time will you need? Minute 30? Perfect.
Hello, everyone. A couple of things. The Graduate Student Advisory Board met with the provost over spring break. We discussed emergency management, like Sadie mentioned earlier, grad student funding issues, and issues in the School of Engineering with loss of staff and how that's impacting students. The International Affairs Committee met today. We discussed a survey that I'm on the subcommittee for, that we created to see kind of what issues international students are facing on campus. If you have international student friends, please tell them that there is a survey in their email, and please fill it out so that we can get some good data from that. We also discussed career options for international students, because a lot of the career fairs that happen on campus, most of their businesses that come along don't allow international students to work for them. So kind of like looking into the future and how we can bring businesses and companies along that international students can actually go to the career fairs and have a good experience. University Senate is tomorrow, like Alessia mentioned. If you are a university senator, please show up because we didn't have quorum last time and we need you. The Emergency Management Associate Director, Matt Matthias, he's going to attend the next GSAB meeting next Wednesday. So I'll report back in the next assembly kind of on what Sadie was mentioning earlier about how the university is coping with situations like Michigan State dealt with earlier this year. And also the last thing I want to mention is I'm going to post it after this assembly in the channel, but there is an international student that unfortunately had a really bad accident this semester and is paralyzed. And there is a GoFundMe that has been created to help him get to graduation this May. He has had to find somewhere else to live because he can't access his apartment because it's on the 3rd floor, and he has medical bills, obviously, with that kind of an experience. So I'm gonna post that in the team. So if you can just share it, if you can't contribute, that's totally fine. We're all students, but if you can share it widely, especially with parents and such, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. By that thunderous amount of applause, I'm gonna guess no questions. All right, thank you very much. All right, and now going on to our next item on the agenda, we have an officer report from our treasurer, Turner Seals. Turner, how much time do you need? 2 minutes, okay.
All right, cool. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'll just get right into this. So what I've been doing, I've been working on building out my turnover documents. That was a really big issue early on this year. It was really hard to kind of hit the ground running. But I really want that to be different this year. I'm really trying to make it robust and really easy for the next treasurer, whoever that is, to kind of get started. So that's one thing I'm working on. Tonight we're seeing the line and block bills and fielding any concerns. So that will be good. Another thing is planning the rest of the year on the treasurer's side of things. So me and Zachariah, me and the fund development director are planning out dates on when the deadline is to see purchase requests, which we think that is going to be around April 24th to 26th. So that's like groups that are allocated funding, like that's the last time we're going to make purchases for you, just because that's when my job ends. That's when the fund development director's job ends. And that is just an agreed upon date with our Silk advisors. We are fielding some funding requests for next cycle. So we only have one cycle left, which is exciting. But before this cycle, we only had around $13,000 left to allocate, and we are allocating most of that this cycle, or at least attempting to. So there's not much money left, but that's being shared with the groups that are trying to have events, and we're working around that to try and have as many events for students as we can. But yeah, I can maybe speak for the fund development director, but I'm really proud of how much funding we've been able to give out this year. Yeah. Like I said, there's $13,237 left to be allocated this cycle before allocations are made final tonight. So keep that in mind. And like the student body vice president said, legislation is due at 5 o'clock on Friday if you want to put in any more bills or for next cycle.
Any questions for our treasurer? All right, seeing none. Oh, David.
Yeah, so we need to submit bills by this Friday at 5. Oh, like when you request. Okay, so yeah, if you're allocated funding, we're setting like the day to make purchases around April 24th or 26th, like right before joint Senate. So if you reach out to us before then, like that's like almost a month away. So should be plenty of time.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Turner.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, and our last officer report of the evening here is from our outreach director, Angela Davis. Angela, how much time would you like? All right. Whenever you're ready.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So, okay. I'm the world's worst multitasker, so bear with me. First, I'm going to show you all how to file for candidacy. So if anyone has not done that yet and would like to file for candidacy, please just like follow along. It's straightforward. They edited the website to make it a little bit more accessible. So you just go to Rock Chalk Central. And click the link. And then this is the important part. You have to sign in. That is the tricky part. This is not me. Okay, so then it'll take you to this nice little page, and right here it says declare your candidacy for student senate. Click the link here. It says here. I tried doing this earlier, so I knew what I was talking about when I came up here. So for me, it looks like this, and I just hit resume. But for you all, it'll look a little different. But then I'm resuming where I left off. Click the link, and it just wants your name, what constituency you want to represent. So like if I were not graduating, I would put down class junior, senior, or like senior, and then your Lawrence Street address, city, state, zip code, phone number, cell phone, yes or no, and your KU email, and then make sure you check the box, and then you should be good to go. Yeah. Any questions on that part before I move on to the next section? Fabulous. Okay. So the last few things that I will share with you all is that we had another hot chocolate event last week, and it was very successful. We had like 40 unique interactions. So I was happy about that. We have new flyers made promoting the elections. So they're like in the Senate office, and we can like set them in the back if anybody like wants to start saying like, hey, just vote. It's like very bland. It just says vote and the dates for the actual elections. So very generic. Anybody can use them. And then, the SUA partnership Chillramics was a lot of fun. That happened this past Monday. So shout out to SUA and thank you to everybody who made a point to come. It was a lot of fun and just a really nice thing for SUA to do on our behalf. Now, any questions?
Any questions for Angela? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So now getting into the next item on our agenda, we have the consent agenda for Senate Bill 23-74, a bill to fund KU chamber and vocal music. Do I see a motion? Motion from Holly, second from Chris. Is there anyone who objects towards moving to a vote on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to that vote. If we can get it posted in the Teams. All right, that vote has now been posted in the Students Assembly channel. Do you agree with the consent agenda? Yes, if you do, no, if you object, and abstain to stay out of the discussion. All right, is there anyone who's not voted on this matter that has the ability to do so? All right, seeing none, I will go ahead and get the vote closed. All right, and with the vote of 38 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, the consent agenda clearly passes. All right, so now moving on to the next item on our agenda, we have Senate Bill 2023-75, a bill to fund the Hack KU. And who do we have presenting that legislation this evening? All right, brilliant. What were your names? Zoe? Michelle. All right, Zoe and Michelle, feel free to head up to the podium here. The legislation is coded 23-75 to find the Google Doc on there. I can come help. Yeah. That won't be too hard to pull up. I just need to receive it to my email. So I'll ask Turner to go ahead and email that to me. If you'll need the presentation before you begin, ideally. Turner, can you email me their presentation so I can get it on the Teams?
Might be on the.
It might be on the Teams. Sure. Let me see if I can find it for you. Seeing it on the Finance Council part of the Teams, Turner. The presentation for Hack KU. You have it? Amazing. In your email or on like the Teams?
I think it was emailed to me.
Okay. And then, yeah, if you can just get it posted in like the Students Assembly channel, that would be great.
Show your phone.
I just got it from Camden. Of course. All right, and how much time do you need? 5 minutes. 10 minutes.
5 is good, yeah.
There might be.
Okay, yeah, we'll work with 5.
Hello, my name is Zoe and I am the director of Hack KU's organizing team this year.
Listen to our speakers, please.
Oh yeah, and then hi, I'm Michelle, the Hack KU finance chair.
So we're here to have a bill to request funding for Hack KU. Hack KU is under the umbrella organization, the Association for Computing Machinery, that does a lot of other stuff within the School of Engineering, like tutoring, practice exams, prof dev and whatnot. But Hack KU specifically is the annual hackathon held here at KU. A hackathon is a kind of programming competition where there's also lots of workshops, social events, mentoring and recruitment opportunities. And we also give out free food and free swag throughout the event. This year, our event will be on April 14th through 16th, so coming up in a couple weeks. It's held throughout the engineering buildings and the engineering complex, and we're projecting around 350 attendees. We do also have sponsors, corporate sponsors, and we get funding from the engineering department and potentially Pepsi funding, but we are requesting money for the food, as I said.
Okay, so this is what all of what we're requesting from Senate. it's kind of a big number, but we pushed it down like 5,000 from our original request. So this is like the best we could do in terms of like deals with the restaurants we're working with. So yeah, it'll be 5 meals, like 2 dinners, 1 lunch, and 1 breakfast. And then we also have accommodations for people who are practicing Ramadan. And then we also have some other things that are kind of necessary for like running the event. So like badges to identify people, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so does anybody have any questions?
Do we have any questions for our presenters? We have about 3 minutes left. I see a question from Farzad. Can we get a catch box or a mic? Thank you, Chris.
So hypothetically, if somebody has a friend that did not sign up for the event yet, can they bring them?
You can still sign up for the event.
Okay. It was whatever. Cool.
Smooth, Farzad.
I'm putting it out there.
Any other questions? Kevin? Point of information, can we get the catch box over to Kevin? Or one of them at least? Holly has one.
All right, hi, Kevin Barnes here. I just wanted to inform everybody that Senate or Finance Council did pass this piece of legislation because we looked at our extended budget for the rest of the fiscal year and realized that it was well within our means to pass this specific request. And that's all.
Thank you for that point of information, Kevin. Do I see a second or a question from Chris? Yes.
Is this something that requires 1,500 rollout?
No, because I believe the request is much greater than 1,500 there.
Sweet.
Yeah, at least.
That's correct.
Yeah,
The total budget for this event is like 15 Gs. We're not even
Yeah.
touching the,
all right. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, do I see a motion? I see a motion from Chris. Previous question, second from Trey. All right, is there anyone who objects to moving to previous question on this legislation? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. Thank you very much, presenters. You can step down. And it'll be 23-75. Oh, okay.
So are you like, what's the guy look like, or are you like, this is what I had on my, I mean, to be honest, like, we should kind of make sure. All the comments, you know, are you going to the? Oh, yeah.
Has now been posted in the Teams. Do you agree with Senate Bill 2023-75? Yes, if you agree with the bill. No, if you do not, and abstain to stay out of the discussion. I was also notified by our student body president that if you have been fasting for Ramadan, we have just hit sundown. And so feel free to go and grab some pizza if you need to go grab that. Is there anyone who has not yet voted on this matter that has the ability to do so? All right, seeing none. Oh. All right, and seeing votes still roll in, so we'll give another 30 seconds on this vote and then hopefully we'll be finished out.
Oh, yeah, that's on my. Feel comfortable sending this to friends and family.
All right, is there anyone else who has not yet voted on this matter that can do so? All right, seeing none, I will move to close the vote. All right, and with a vote of 35 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, and 2 abstentions, this legislation clearly passes. All right, so now we'll go ahead and advance to the next item on our agenda, which is a bill to fund DECA, Senate Bill 23-79. The presentation is up there. Yeah, in PDF form, it's at the end. Like right after your legislation.
5 minutes. Where?
So it's that PDF in the center there.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
So this is a bill to fund DECA. I have paper copies. If you guys prefer paper copies, this is like a bill analysis. I'm going to go ahead and let Emily over here, talk about what DECA is, and then I'll describe the bill. So.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Green. I'm the president of KU DECA, which is a chapter of DECA Inc., which is essentially an international competitive business organization where students compete in solving speed case studies in different business areas. We have a big emphasis on business, kind of as I mentioned. However, the KU chapter thinks that the development of professional skills is super important for any academic background. So we actually have engineering majors and liberal arts majors and the whole sorts. But yeah, that's a little bit about DECA. And tonight we're mainly talking about our international competition. So yeah.
Okay. So we originally were requesting like 3,500 something, but we have since lowered it to $2,350. Down here is a cost breakdown. So we're looking at an averaging price of $300 for flights, $302.40 for hotel. I will say that this hotel is required by the DECA. Was it the DECA board or something? They have to go to a specific hotel. So that's why that's that price. Registration fees are $135. Other funding from the Undergraduate Business Council was $302.40. And then they're going to use their own chapter funds, which is $200 per person. For a grand total of $235 per person is what we need from Senate. And then that adds up to $2,350. So any questions?
Any questions? I see one from Chris.
I would take 2 if I had the time. First of all, could you give us some background on the event you're wanting funding for?
Yes, sorry, totally forgot about that. So they're going to nationals. It's going to be in Orlando, Florida. You said that there's like what, 16 people going?
Yeah, so internationals is in Orlando, Florida this year. We have 10 students going from the KU chapter, and there's about 2,000 students that compete nationally at the competition itself.
Okay.
And you had a brief follow-up? Okay, I'll allow it. Oh, a separate question. Is there anyone else who has a question on the floor? All right, I see one from Kevin. Are you fine if Chris gets a follow-up real quick? Perfect. All right, Chris, you can go ahead and do that.
Would you mind navigating to the full bill?
Yes. Do you have the
It's right next to it.
right next to it?
On the
Okay.
left.
Left. Awesome. There it is.
Okay, so I'm looking at the last page here.
Last page. This one.
One more down. And I'm seeing your enacting clause that says enacted that the University of Kansas entertain the idea of amending the constitutional provisions.
Yeah, just an idea that maybe we revisit travel funding since we've slashed or since we've suspended things so many times. Either we revisit it or we, to have discussions about it for the next administration. So.
Okay, may I ask a question to the Vice President?
Yes.
Would this create an actual obligation for us if we pass it as an enacting part of the bill?
As it's currently written, no, because it's just saying we should entertain the
The
idea.
language is just saying entertaining. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If anything, like, I would say it's not pertinent to the funding bill since it wouldn't be a constitutional amendment, but that's like a
It would be a
separate
welcome
conversation.
Yeah,
there.
it'd be a welcome byproduct. It's something the Senate, I think, should reconsider in the future. That's why I added it in there. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Kevin, you had yours. It was answered. All right. Any other questions? Motion from Holly to vote, second from Blake. All right, is there anyone who objects to moving towards a vote on Bill 23-79? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to that vote. Thank you very much, presenter.
Yeah, that's it. Don't the rules have to be suspended?
That's quite right. Yes, the 2/3 rule suspension, because this is travel funding, correct? Yeah, so before that. Okay, so motion to suspend travel restrictions from Holly and then second from Kevin, I think I just saw. And then I'll go ahead and keep the original for the passage of the bill there.
You can't do that.
Like it has to be suspended by the assembly itself. Yeah. No, this one, since the suspension has already gone through, that's what's required, 2/3. This will require a simple majority vote like other funding ledge. Has it been posted? All right. All right, that bill has now been posted. Do you agree with Senate Bill 23-79? Yes, if you do, no, if you do not, and abstain to stay out of the discussion. As I said, this will require a simple majority vote. All right, is there anyone else who has not yet voted on this matter that has the ability to do so? All right, seeing none, I will look to close this vote. And with a vote of 41 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, this bill clearly passes. All right, advancing to the next item on our agenda, we have a rather lengthy one, the Senate Bill 23-70, a bill to fund the fiscal year line item allocations for 2024. Turner, I believe you'll be presenting that. Yeah, blocks you. And how much time would you like to present line?
10 minutes.
Okay.
5.
Pick one. Okay.
5.
Whenever you're ready.
Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who are here in Finance Committee, you were able to see most of the discussion around the line bill, but I'll go ahead and reiterate for those who weren't there. So just some quick facts. The line bill this year, the line funding this year, we had about 85 groups, give or take a couple of groups, with $80,000 in funding from line proper and $15,000 from DEI, compared to around 35 groups that applied last year with similar funding numbers. And so it was definitely a task, and me and Turner spent a lot of time putting a lot of thought into the groups that applied for funding, how much we should allocate towards them. And overall, the theme that I want everyone to get from this is that this was very much so a thought out process, albeit we aren't perfect, albeit there are issues with regards to it, but we think this is the most perfect process. This is the most perfect bill that we could have produced. Just some clarification, last week, we had a conversation in regards to mock trial where we were able to successfully increase their ask by removing general funding requests. So every student group at KU is allocated $100 in general funding, no question, to do whatever they want. And so what we did simply was remove that general funding from the line accounting and into next year. And so by all means, those groups are open to apply to the general funding next year. And so I think those are the biggest changes in regards to line. But again, this is again a huge package. It helps numerous student groups here at KU. And I think that we can stand behind this and are willing to, one, entertain a conversation, but also ready to pass it if the chamber feels necessary.
Yeah. I'd also like to add that although these are the values that were found by the line committee, we encourage any group that wants more funding to come through our different funding processes, whether that's Wednesday night funding, DEI funding, etc. Like, these are not caps on the amount of funding that organizations receive. I don't want anyone to think that. This is just what we could do with the amount of funding we were given to allocate, which wasn't enough. It's just simple as that. It wasn't enough funding to give out to all the organizations to give everyone their 100% amount. We knew that, and we encourage anyone that didn't get their full ask to request funding next fall or next spring.
All right, I think Holly has a question back here. Yeah, can we get the bill pulled up here? It's Bill 70. It should be right after that PowerPoint, the PDF document. After the PDF. Or that's block. Where'd the line go?
Is it honor?
I don't think it is. Go to the teams and see if you can the teams.
Where would it be?
The ledge tracker. To the right.
Oh.
And then just go to and then cycle 11. There it is.
This is the updated one?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so I figured instead of me like saying all these, I can scroll slowly.
Everyone has it, right?
Everyone does have it on their laptop, so I don't know if it's necessary, but we can go kind of scroll. The blue is the student groups that got their general funding removed. The red is DEI funding. So that can be maybe a little confusing. But yeah. And then we can go to the bottom. We allocated our full $80,000 of line funding, and then $15,270 was allocated from the DEI line. Are there any questions? Other questions?
Turner, could you also quickly go over the amended sections that added funding for the line item bill?
Yeah, I can.
And then I'll go to Chris for a question.
KU. Yeah, so the purpose of removing all these general funding allocations were to free up more funding for mock trial. We had a lot of representatives from mock trial that really advocated for this, and I think Finance Council agreed that this is what they wanted to do. So with the extra funding that mock trial received, they now have funding for Tournament 3 registration and hotel, Tournament 4 registration, and AMTS registration, which increases their total to $10,684 when it was before 6,200.
All right, Chris, your question.
How have you communicated with the groups whose general allocations were struck from this proposal?
Yeah, there was a message sent out yesterday to all the groups that actually every single line group. So they received the information via just a large email that indicated what the change was and why it happened.
Follow up?
Yeah.
Did you receive anything back from any of the groups?
I did from a few groups, yeah. Just wondering what the process was to get the funding next spring or not next spring, but next fall. And also just generally why it happened. So I tried to explain the finance council's reasoning as best I could and also explain how to get that money. Yeah.
Right, and we're currently out of time. Do we have a motion? 5-minute extension, second from Chris. All right, and is there anyone who objects to a 5-minute time extension? All right, seeing none, time is extended by 5 minutes.
Okay, in the process of cutting a lot of these groups' allocations, did you give them the opportunity to maybe come and present their case as to why they need that funding instead of just having reallocating it to mock trial?
Do you want to answer? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so it was public that the line bill was how much it was allocated and that it was going to be heard in finance council. And so by all means, I would have had the opportunity to go ahead and look into it. I think that answers the top of your question. Sadie, if you want to.
Would it be helpful if I explain the general funding thing more?
Yeah, if you want to provide our point of information.
Okay, so basically, every single in our constitution, every single registered student organization that is like through Silk that's open to all students is eligible for $100 of general funding. It's like a constitutional thing. And so any group, like I don't know if you've all noticed, but consent agenda items this year, it's up to $1,000. What it used to be was up to $100. It's just because it was all general funding, and like there's no use in arguing over it because it's like it's given. Like it's like they're gonna get the $100. They can do what they want with it, all that stuff. So the thought process behind this, and that like $100 stipulation still exists. The thought process behind removing all the general funding from line and moving it to the Wednesday night funding is because the general funding isn't actually, it doesn't really belong in line. It's a Wednesday night from it funding like term, if that makes sense, from the unallocated. So it made more sense to go there, but also all those student groups who applied for that funding are still constitutionally mandated that they will still receive that $100. So basically what the thought process was it made more sense for mock trial, who's going to have these expenditures, like for sure, and have these larger expenditures, for them to like get their money through line, and those groups who have the $100 come through because those are easier to facilitate on a Wednesday night. We have the funding that's already constitutionally mandated for them. And so that's kind of the rationale. And then also in the email that Turner sent out, it explains like that $100. It also offered for them to come and present here if they wanted to, like that this is the next meeting. And then also the part of our turnover processes is including a full written out bill for those like fees. So that way, like the treasurer, whomever they shall be, will be able to come into the first full Senate cycle 1 with that bill. And it's already written out for general funding for all these student organizations in the fall. Well, it depends on if they want it in the fall or spring. Some of them wanted it for like a spring event. So, but we'll have them separated out, and it's based off of their preferences too. So that's kind of the rationale as to why it's just easier to facilitate those automatic requests and ensure that everyone still is allocated their funding eventually, as opposed to mock trial. Since they're coming through next year, they may not get the like $6,000 they were asking for, because we're only going to be working with a $40,000 Wednesday night fund. So the odds of everyone getting their money in the end are just lower in how we had it. So that was kind of rationale. That makes sense. Sorry, I know there's a lot in there.
Does that point of information cover it for you? Awesome. And yeah, I mean, very much thank you to Senator Kevin Barnes over here for getting that bill drafted for the next administration. So one less headache to come. Do we have any other questions on the line item allocations? I see a motion. I have a question on the floor over here, though. Perfect. Go ahead and state your name and then, yeah, ask your question.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, my name is Jana Richardson and I'm representing the Black Student Union today. So if you scroll down to our funding, it's funded by Diversity and and inclusion. This year we received $9,000 in funding from you guys, and now we're getting cut to $3,000. I'm wondering, since funding is the only thing that you provide us, what other things are you gonna do to support our organization on campus?
That's a great question. I actually can go into a little more specific. So last year, the allocation for Black Student Union was 8940. And this year, I believe it's around 3,400. I might be wrong in that context. 3,400, perfect. You're correct. That's significantly lower than what you received last year. And I can go into what that $3,400 was allocated for. So I believe it was part of it was for the back to school barbecue. And the rest of it, yes, the Black Student Union 10 tickets. Now, you're right. That's not how much you got last year. But also this year, we received more than double the amount of applications with about the same amount of funding to allocate. However, what I do know is that I've worked consistently with Black Student Union. You guys are awesome people in terms of coming into the DI committee and listening to what funding you guys need. And so what I do recommend is that next year, the same way that it happened this year, you guys are more than welcome to come into Senate and request this funding. This is by no means a verdict for not just you, but also any other club. This is more so an indication of how we split this pre-pooled $8,000. But by all means, next year, we are more than happy to hear your funding requests and more than happy to fulfill. I mean, I can't promise that, but this year we were more than happy to fill in DEI fund. I'm sure that the Student Senate would love to hear that, but I hope that answered your question.
We do have a need for a time extension.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right, second from Chris.
My question's.
Is there anyone who objects to a time extension? All right, seeing none, 5 minutes is extended to speaker's time.
Yeah, my question is specifically for Turner and asking like in the deliberation process for why BSU, through the whole DEI process, like being it cut from, their $9,000 in funding down to the 3,400, like I understand that there was a lot more applicants that applied, but can we get into like the specifics, like maybe of the deliberation process and why specifically BSU was chosen to receive the cuts?
I think you're positioning it wrong. I don't think it was a wise like BSU.
I'd just like to say that when it comes to the DEI groups, that was mostly like me and Zachariah. We went through the deliberations, tried to make it as equitable as equitable as possible. I mean, we only had around $15,000 to give out to DEI groups. There's not as much DEI line to give out as there is unallocated. We just tried to make it as fair as possible. That's really all I can really answer there. I mean, Zachariah can touch on more.
Well, I think that's an okay answer. Can I ask a follow-up?
Well, let the speaker finish first before.
Again, I don't think there's a question of why BSU. I don't think there's a question for why any student organ. I think at the end of the day, we had a list of requests and we had, what was the total request that we had in comparison to 8,000? It had to be around $200,000+. I had to find a way to fit that into $8,000 and so, plus the $15,000 for DEI. And so we were sitting there doing the hard math, and ultimately none of it was in regards to pushing these groups away, but more so finding areas to fulfill it. For example, the BUC conference, that was a huge thing that was talked about this year. And by all means, we felt like that was an important thing for us at Senate to at least make sure that there was at least some representation next year. And so we feel like this 10 tickets is a good indicator, but that does not a verdict again on next year for how many you can have, because by all means, as an indication from this year and should be next year, that we are more than happy to listen to you, but also if it looks like anything from this last year, that we're more than happy to fulfill that. And so
I'd also like to say for BSU's funding, one thing that was important to us was the back to school barbecue. Because when we were making our decisions, it was like how early in the year your events are going to be. So the back to school barbecue is obviously when we get back to school early in the year. We wanted to ensure that this would happen without any like financial problems. So we made sure to fund that. That was one of our considerations. And since the BSU conference is in the winter, we figured by promising you guys you could have 10 seats, that'd be a good starting point. And then over the first semester or the first semester you could come and request more once you found out that you had for sure more people that could attend that conference. So that was kind of our deliberation process.
You had another question?
Yeah.
All right.
Throughout the year, besides the conference and our back to school barbecue, like what are you guys supporting us with? Because we don't feel supported.
I think that's a great question. That's something I can definitely dig into a little bit more. I wish I had our computer in front of us to go ahead and dig into, but you requested you had $8,900 from Student Senate. And I recall greatly, touching back with you, me or Turner on each one of those deliberate each one of those allocations in terms of how you want to split that 8940 up. And I love, you know, the way that we treat student groups are all the same, but BSU is one that's important on our campus, and we tried our best. I remember at times, you know, fulfilling late orders at times, but that's so small and insignificant. More so, it's a question of, yes, we grant you funding, but insofar as what else we can do, there's a lot. And there's a lot that I don't have answers to, but it's a conversation that we'd love to have. And maybe it's a shortcoming of the Senate insofar as right now, but I'd love to continue this conversation after this deliberation and sit down one-on-one and talk to you in person and ask, I mean, what else can we do for you? Because
Any other questions?
I have one more question.
Yeah, sure, Blake. Any other questions on the floor? All right, you're good.
So BSU's funding cut, were there any other organizations or student groups that got cut to the extent that BSU did in terms of the allotted amount?
I can't tell you that answer to the exact amount, but I will tell you that the way that we went ahead and allocated, as Trina touched on earlier, is the recency. That was a huge factor in how we were allocating. And so events that were more proximate to the beginning of the year was something that we took into account in terms of how we funded. But no, I can't give you that exact answer right now. I'm going to be honest with you. I can't tell you if there's another group that went from 8940 to 3400. But I mean, I can't tell you that there's no other group that I would love to stand more with and sit down with and talk with and help out more than, I mean, BSU. I mean, you guys came up right here. It's dope. Let's have a conversation, and I'd love to have that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. I'd also like to say that the amount of money that these student groups were allocated doesn't express how important that the groups are. This was really just a battle for proximity when the year started. Like, our entire thought process behind this line bill was, we want to make this as easy as possible for the next treasurer's office, whoever that may be, to be able to fund these groups without like a hitch. You know, we had some difficulty early in the year just because we didn't know the funding processes that well right at the beginning, and that, you know, kind of hurt some student groups. But with this in mind, with, you know, money for back to school barbecue, that event, you guys will be able to, you know, get items purchased right away, and hopefully that event can go, you know, smoothly. But that was our thought process. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
All right, are there any other questions on the floor? I see a question back here. We're currently out of time. Do I need a time extension? Holly? 5 minutes. I see a second from Kevin. All right, and is there anyone who objects to another 5-minute time extension? All right, seeing none, time is extended. And you can go ahead and state your name and ask your question there in the back.
Hi, my name is Heaven. I'm also representing BSU. I do see that you guys have 10 people that you would be covering to go to conference. I don't know if you guys are aware that we do send delegates every year to plan this event, and they are required to be a conference. So just not think about members itself, just 7 of those people are going to be covered by delegates, right? So if you think about it, technically only 3 people that are technically members are going to the conference, because 70 people are delegates. So I was wondering if you guys considered that when making these decisions.
No, actually, that's a fact that, I mean, I just learned that fact. You're right. I mean, I remember this year there was a huge point made about, in regards to funding conference, about sending out a huge KU delegation, and I'm glad we were able to help out with that. But again, I want to reiterate that this isn't a verdict on how much money Senate's going to give you for the conference at all. And I hope that, you know, this is more so an indication of, we took this $8,000 that we had pre-packaged for the year and we split it up, and we wanted to fund 10 tickets. But by all means, does that not mean that you can come in next year, request it from us, from the DEI fund, from other sources? It's more so an indication of how we split the specific form of funding up.
Any other questions and or follow-up? Question up here?
I guess not really a direct question, but more of like, appreciate everything you've done this year, this semester. They were able to send 40 students to conference this year, which was amazing. Probably the biggest turnout that BSU has had for conference in a while, which was really cool. I'd say the big thing is just like that continued support. I understand that right now it only gets us 10 people, which is in reality only really 3. But we do need that support from Senate because we don't have a lot of other opportunities to get funding. Whether that's if we were to go work basketball games and football games, like no one really wants to do that. We do need the support of Senate. And so especially going into the next year, making sure that, again, whoever is in these leadership positions
With
are
this-
kind of extending their hands out. So I hope you can do that for us.
Can I answer?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I'm glad that this year was amazing. I mean, I saw some pretty cool pics and videos. By all means, I mean, listen, as long I'm gonna go off the cuff a little bit. As long as I'm here, I'm gonna make sure I can do what I can do for not just you, but for every other student group out here. Especially those that come from a diverse background. I think that's sort of indicative of myself. You know, Turner has that same sentiment, and I think that's the same for all of us here in Senate. And so I'm glad that we're able to make sure that this conference is phenomenal. And I mean, as long as I can make sure that next year is phenomenal, if I'm still out here, that's my role. And so I appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone, you know, the amazing things you guys do on campus. There's a question in the back.
Does that answer your question? Well, Jeffrey? Perfect. And we had a question from Josefa as well up here. Oh, no? Oh, all right, from Holly. Can we get a mic back to you? Or the catch box?
So in Finance Council last week, I brought up the idea about sending an email to the student groups that had the $100 cut because it's going to go into the general funding, the Wednesday night funding, like next in the fall. And I guess my idea is, could we potentially figure out how much it would cost to send like those extra 30 individuals that you'd want to send? And like we're doing, like Kevin has so kindly done, written a bill to go through in the fall, have that bill ready in your turnover documents so that the next treasurer can just submit that in the fall in the first cycle so that we can show our extended support to BSU that we want you to go to the conference, but we just have to use a different line of funding to do it. Is that something possible that we could work with BSU in the coming weeks to do?
Yeah, so my response to that is that this would have to go through DEI fund because it's technically travel, but that is something that Zachariah could definitely put in his turnover documents to, you know, indicate that that's what he believes should happen. But yeah, I mean, that can totally happen. Yeah.
Because if we do that, then we're showing, you know, that we do support you all. It's just,
yeah,
we have different areas of funding. And obviously we had more student groups come.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good idea. Get it done in August, September, whenever we get back. I'm gonna steal that. So
Yeah, the only hiccup that can be foreseen with that is if the administration doesn't follow through with that, but that really becomes a question of that time. Yes. All right. And then, yeah, with that, we're out of time for questions. Did we have any other ones on the floor? Oh, motion, previous question from Chris. Second over here. All right. And is there anyone who objects to moving to previous question? All right, seeing none, we'll move to previous question on this legislation. Thank you very much, Turner and Zachariah. All right, that has now been posted. Do you agree with the line allocation? Yes, if you do, no, if you do not, and abstain, stay out of the discussion. And I believe this requires a 2/3 vote to pass. Right, currently waiting for 4 more votes before we meet quorum. All right, if you've not yet voted, please get that vote in the next 20 seconds. All right. Is there anyone who has not yet voted on this matter that wishes to do so and or has the ability to do so? All right. We good? Cool. All right. We'll go ahead and close this vote then with no objections and with a vote of 32 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, and 4 abstentions. This legislation clearly passes. All right, now we'll be moving on to the next item on our agenda, a bill to fund the fiscal year 24 block allocations presented by Camden. How much time would you like?
Give me 5.
Okay.
Let me pull this up as well. Where do you recommend I get to this? Oh, here it is.
That one should already be up there, like after the PDF.
What?
After the PDF up there, it should be the block bill.
That one?
No, like after that PDF, right next to that.
There we go. Okay, cool. I think like 5 minutes probably be enough.
Whenever you're ready.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name's Camden. If you don't know who I am, I'm the finance chair. First off, I'd like to give a big thank you to Turner and Zachariah for taking care of line. In the Constitution, the finance chair chairs both fee, line, and block as well. Line was in the week immediately after fee, and I don't know if you guys like knew me during it was not a great time. It was not a great look for Camden Baxter, generally speaking. So I took the week off, and Turner and Zachariah handled line for me, and I'm very, very thankful. I don't like pawning difficult decisions off on others, but it was a week, guys. I don't know what else to tell you. So I did come back for block though, and formed a committee in less than 48 hours. And so I'd like to also express my gratitude to Simra, who I believe is here. Please raise your hand, Simra. Kevin Wynn, also not here. And Megan Stoprin, who was here at some point. I don't think they're in the room at the moment, but with those 3 individuals and Madison Orange, we put together this block allocation. And this ended up being probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in Student Senate. And I've been on fee twice. And what I mean by this is that in order to make the buses run and to keep the mental health infrastructure, as lacking as it is, from collapsing, we had to make some difficult decisions in fee. And the end result was a nearly $40,000 cut to the Student Senate activity fee. So within the giant pie that is the student fee, which is, we'll just say $500 for the sake of ease, right? A $20 chunk of that is Student Senates to mess around with. Okay, so from that 20%, we're going to create another smaller pie, right? Of that pie, block is the vast majority. It's about $650,000. So in other words, of the nearly $1 million that Student Senate claims that we allocate per year, block is the single largest component of that. And it funds all kinds of student groups, as you will soon see. The problem is, though, as I said, in order to make the buses run and keep the mental health system from collapsing, the size of that pie got reduced significantly. It was in the ballpark of, when you do the math, it was like $70,000, $80,000. Okay. No, it wouldn't have been that much. It would have been like 50, right, Turner? Something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. And that, in tandem with the fact that the Office of Graduate Studies moved off of the EOF back onto block, meant that we not only had less money to allocate, but we had more mouths to feed in the process, sticking with the food metaphors. So what does this mean? The upshot is that we had to make some really difficult decisions. We had to manage to distribute roughly $150,000 worth in cuts relative to where we've been in years past across 16 student organizations. So how the hell do you do that? I still wonder that myself. It was a very stressful process, but we created a little, tier list of things that we want to value. And first and foremost was wages. We
are always uncomfortable making cuts, but we're especially uncomfortable making cuts that will cost people their livelihoods, particularly student workers. So within these block organizations, which range from the CCO, which has the office next to the Student Senate office, to the Natural History Museum, Lead Center, etc. I won't read them off to you. I trust that you're capable of doing that yourselves. Some parts of these fees go toward operational expenses and others go to wages. I'll use one example here. Let me find it. Okay, student support and case management is essentially has one paid employee, and the entirety of that salary and fringe benefits is included there in that $64,890. So in other words, if you touch that block allocation, you're cutting someone's pay. Obviously, we didn't want to do that. So we found ourselves in the position where, and I'll use another example, the band, which is here. Received about $43,000 last year, right? $32,500 of which were operational expenses. This covers the other, whatever the hell a marching band needs money for on a daily basis. Every dollar on top of that allocation that the bands have received in years past and was hoping to receive in this year, and the ask was like $96,000, by the way, was for sousaphones, right? Which are the big curly tubas that they wear around. Some of them are bronze, some of them are silver. They want them all to be silver. Sousaphones are also like stupid expensive, they're like $10,000 a pop, right? So in years past, when we've given the bands, like last year, we gave them $43,000, $32,500 of that was used to cover operational expenses, as was listed in their block allocation. And the additional 10K was used to buy sousaphones. So this year we're like, nope, no sousaphones. We're just going to do operational expenses. So I don't bring that example to poke fun at the band. I just want to give you an idea of our point of view and our mindset as we made these decisions about which groups to cut and which to not, and to borrow some parlance from the fee review process, prioritizing wants versus needs. And in this case, giving wages the highest priority in terms of needs. So alternative break was left. We met their ask, which I believe was flat. It might have actually been a decrease. I don't have that information in front of me, which I probably should. Give me 5 more minutes. I'm so sorry.
5-minute time extension from Sadie, second from Simra. All right, is there anyone who objects to a 5-minute time extension? Seeing none, time's extended.
Wonderful. Alternative breaks was left flat. The bands received a reduction. The CCO was left flat and was one of the few organizations to be left flat, with the general view that as you look at the world around you and as I look at the world around me, I've never thought that this place needs less community service in general terms. So we left the CCO flat. Forensics, the debate team, was also left flat. Jayhawk Motorsports was left flat. That was a difficult ask to turn down. We do support their organization, but unfortunately could not accommodate it. The Lead Center received a reduction. Their allocation was about at $100,000. 90,000 of which goes to wages. So again, we cut them, but it was kept below the threshold the cuts were kept below the threshold so as not to reduce student employment opportunities on campus. The same was the case for the Natural History Museum. Again, they received a reduction, but their allocation is sufficient to cover all of their current student employment needs, so no one's losing their job. Now, the Office of Graduate Studies is still underfunded relative to where they should be. In years past, and I mean like 2 to 3 fiscal years ago, their block allocation, Holly, you can check me on this, was somewhere in the ballpark of $150,000. This obviously is not that. This is a modest increase from what they received last year through EOF. But the unfortunate reality is that we didn't have the financial bandwidth to support OGS the way that they deserve, which again is very, very difficult. But it's just kind of how it is, I guess. The Spencer Museum of Art also received a fairly substantial cut of about $10,000. That $10,000 is used exclusively for event funding, like the planning of art in the park or whatever it happens to be called. The $35,000 all goes towards student wages. Again, our priority being students having jobs. This money goes directly back into the pockets of students, and we were under no circumstances going to go below this amount for the Spencer. The Sports Exercise Psychology Club were held flat. This is a relatively small amount, so it was easier to stomach that. Now, the largest entity on block is Student Senate Administration Fund. That's what I get paid from. That's what every Student Senate employee that is paid from. The politics of us claiming $130,000 for ourselves out of the student fee aside,
Traditionally, this ask is not touched. In other words, the block committee grants the full Student Senate administration fee ask. And I really didn't feel like being the one to buck that trend. I already pushed a student fee over $500. I didn't need two distinctions to my name. Next up is student support and case management. Again, this is a position. You touch this, you're cutting someone's pay. We're not doing that. The University Dance Company received a reduction as well. Again, it was not enough to affect their wages, only modestly at the margins touch their operations. University Theater received a reduction as well. It was a few $1,000s. It wasn't huge, but again, keeping wages and employees in mind. That's how we settled on this figure. And finally, the William K. Jones Military Affiliated Student Center was held flat. We appreciate all the work that they do on campus, and that is a difficult number to change without affecting people's jobs, bringing our total to $677,020. Thank you again for hearing me out, and I promise I don't love to hear myself talk. I just feel obligated to explain this, so we're not just signing the check for almost $1 million. But that's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions you all have for me.
Any questions? And/or motion? All right, I see a motion from Kevin to previous question, I imagine. All right, and I saw a second back there from Austin. Is there anyone who objects to moving to previous question on this legislation? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Camden. All right, that is now in the channel there. Do you agree with the block allocation? Yes, if you do, no, if you do not, and abstain, stay out of the discussion. This will also require 2/3 to pass and will be remanded back to the Finance Council if it does not.
Also, now that Megan's back in the room, I would like to extend my gratitude for her help in the crafting of the block allocation. So please give Megan and Simmer a round of applause. Hey, at least I got paid. They didn't. So they're the real MVPs.
All right, please get any votes in the next 15 seconds. All right, is there anyone who has not yet voted on this matter that has the ability to do so?
You should have received some documentation.
Seeing none, I will move to close this vote. And with a vote of 36 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and 1 abstention, this legislation clearly passes. All right, 2 more pieces of legislation to go, both of them constitutional amendments. Next, we'll have Senate Bill 23-77, a bill to amend the president's cabinet positions in the Constitution. I believe that's presented by you, Sadie. And how much time would you like? Sadie?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah, like 5 minutes.
Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so this is what I mentioned in my officer report, and this is the bill summary, but it kind of just sums it up. it's basically just kind of codifying a lot of the roles that the executive staff already does. I don't know if any of you have taken a gander at like the exec staff roles and things like that. But sometimes it'll be like really specific to different things and sometimes it's super vague. So just kind of balancing it out and adding a couple line items, making it easier for like incoming executive staff members or like president's cabinet is how it's referred to in the Constitution, like incoming presidents, whatever, I just mixed them up, executive staff members to know what their expectations are, know what they need to be accomplishing and all that stuff. And it also will be easier for the president, the vice president and chief of staff to hold their exec accountable because they can be like, this is constitutionally what you're mandated to do. You're not doing it, whatever. Further beyond that, for you all, it's easier for the Senate to also hold executive staff accountable because then you'll all have tangible things that you know they should be accomplishing and to reference. And so like, it kind of is just like this little trifecta of could be good, in my opinion, for a lot of reasons. And then also, so I'll get to that actually. So most of what you see in red is added, like not very much is taken away. And it's like this for every single position. And so I know it's a long bill. I hope you all looked at it before. I'm not going to go over everything individually, but like for student body president, like adding that they need to be attending and scheduling monthly meetings with the provost and chancellor. We already do that. Like that's part of what we already do, but it's not in the Constitution. Serving on the SAC, like this isn't in the Constitution either, that they need to be attending K-board meetings every single month. For codifying the supervision of the chief of staff by the student body president, since the chief of staff, we'll address in a second, currently oversees them. There's no one formally overseeing the chief of staff. So like how it functionally works, the student body president oversees them. And like, that's the kind of like role, but it's not codified. So it's kind of just the general idea throughout all of these. We also added in terms of required committees and boards that the Students Assembly, the Student Executive Council, so STUDEX, the required campus fee committee, they don't vote on it, they're required to go, and EOF, these also are already in the Constitution in other places, it's just making it all kind of like streamlined. And it kind of rolls like that throughout the rest of the positions as well. If you have any questions on specific positions, I'd love to answer them, but I'm going to try and get through this. So I know that not all of you are super compelled by this. I also have this. I'm going to be introducing an amendment after this because it was brought to my attention that coordinators have to be better because we're going to try and save the COS email because it's just like, it's easier than creating a whole new email for this position. That's why we chose this. But it's been brought to like our attention as like the graduate student body president, the vice president, and I by our advisors in the provost office that using like the corporate roles kind of like that start with chief can be insensitive towards indigenous communities. And there have been like movements in the past to remove that language. And so we felt this could be a good time to kind of take action on that and really just kind of in a smaller way be consistent with our thoughts and our intentions and the resolutions that we pass. And so it doesn't materially change the position, but it does change its name. I just wanted to be coordinator staff so we can keep the COS email just because like continuity, it makes sense. That's going to be the amendment I introduce later. And then also, this doesn't have every single time that chief of staff is mentioned in the Constitution, but if this is passed, then those will be changed retroactively, if that makes sense. It's like it'll be consistent in the whole Constitution, even if you don't see those name changes here. And then it goes through all the executive staff positions. The two things that I haven't talked about yet that are on this bill is the removal of 3 roles from the president's cabinet, or from this president's cabinet and like executive staff positions. And those are the Center for Community Outreach Executive Director, the Center for Community Outreach Managing Director, and then the Transportation Coordinator. And the only reason is all of those roles, like they do still exist on this campus, and they are like the CCO is funded by Student Senate and Transit is funded independently. They still exist. They're super important, but they started in Student Senate. They have since like grown beyond what we do. And so they're their own things now. And this is just reflecting that like the Student Senate, like, you guys shouldn't have the ability to like impeach the CCO should you feel they're not doing their job, because we don't no longer oversee the CCO. So it's kind of just protecting them. They still will exist in their own right. They're still going to have those partnerships. We still fund them through block, all that stuff. Same with Transit. They're still going to be on fee. They'll still have their advocacy. Nothing materially changes. It just kind of streamlines, like more so reflects what's actually happening in Student Senate. Also, if you look at Transit Coordinator too, it's kind of fun, more of Senate history, but like Senate used to like run buses at KU, and the Transit Coordinator specifically, like they would design the routes, they'd oversee the contracts, all that stuff. Like a student did that, which is kind of cool to see how far Transit's come, that this position still exists, even though it's changed a little bit. And also what an impact that this space can be for students for such a continued piece of time. So I think that's a fun little note here at the end. I planned that, practiced in advance, so
Any questions? Call to question. Oh, well, I think Sadie did have an
Oh,
amendment.
yeah, sorry. Can I, yeah,
Yeah,
if that's okay with you all, to amend the
Yeah.
coordinators.
I would as well.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So is everyone fine with switching it out to coordinator of staff instead of staff coordinator? All right. No objections. If you go to that section of the bill, I've already drafted out the amendment.
I'm doing this in the least efficient way possible. I'm a big fan of government in that way.
Oh, you just passed. At the top there.
Yep.
All right, so that'll be the new title there. All right, previous question from Kevin. Did I see that motion again? Yeah, and then second from Holly. Do we have any objections to moving to a vote on this legislation? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to a vote.
It's not important. Have you seen this stuff?
Are you talking about the proceeding coordinator stuff? Yeah, no, that'll be changed on the back end there. Just putting it in there on the official article so that we have that in mind. All right, that vote is now up in the Students Assembly channel. Do you agree with Senate Bill 23-77? Yes, if you do, no, if you do not, and abstain to stay out of the discussion. And while that vote is rolling, I'm gonna go ahead and reignite a Senate tradition of having people present while we roll a vote. It's 8:30, so I want to make sure we get people out in a timely fashion, or gosh, 8:40. So Chris, if you want to come up and present the next item on our agenda here. Bill 76, a bill to improve funding accessibility. How much time?
Can I get 10? I shouldn't need that much, just in case there's questions. We don't have to do extension all the time.
Of course.
All right, am I at the end here?
Yeah, at the end there.
Okay.
Brilliant. Whenever you're ready.
So I was intending to write this bill earlier in February. That eventually led me to write the reorganization bill instead. But now I've been talking with the treasurer and the Senate's coordinator. And I think we've got some really good ways here to make it easier for student organizations to get funding for some cool events and promotions. Just going over some background in the Constitution. Right now, there's 16 prohibitions on funding. Most of them are pretty good. You got like no commercial promotions, no like funding to campaign for student elections. But you also got some ones there that aren't pulling as much weight nowadays. So you got a restriction on social functions altogether. Anything funded has to have an educational purpose. Awards and giveaways, decorations and costumes are prohibited too. But the treasurer and I felt those were a great way for student groups to promote themselves and boost their event engagement. And this part down here, whereas 5, that was the treasurer's idea. So right now, reimbursements as a method of funding are entirely prohibited, but they are allowed by the university. So we decided to go in, and the treasurer created new procedures for reimbursements. Getting into the nitty gritty here, you'll see that social functions, that entire part was taken out. We just put in a little clause here about alcohol because you still can't get university money to buy alcohol, unfortunately. Awards and giveaways, we swapped that out for just a basic restriction here. Can't use Senate money for gift cards. We felt that allowing gift cards was not a wise use of Senate money. And also giveaway items can't exceed $200 of a funding request for the same reason. Decorations, costumes, and regalia are right out, no replacement. Honorariums, I want to take a look at those, but it turns out it's a university policy that Senate money can't go to KU faculty honorariums, so that's fine. And reimbursements are taken out here. And in place of the reimbursement section, we're adding on a new tiny little section near the end of the funding regulations. Just one main part and 5 subsections. Reimbursements have to be approved by the treasurer, fund development director. You need some basic documentation steps, providing your W-9 and itemized receipt. You can't use reimbursements for things that funding isn't usually allowed for. You can't use reimbursements for venues. Just a basic notice here that reimbursements can probably take a lot longer than regular funding. So just to avoid any scheduling issues there. And at the very end, just if you don't follow any of these rules, then you don't get your reimbursement. So yeah, I think this is a good way to make Senate funding more accessible to student groups. Are there any questions?
Do we have any questions?
Back there.
Back here.
Yeah, so I appreciate that you put in this section about, confirmation for reimbursement, because I do think in past years there have been issues with student groups maybe using funds for things they're not supposed to. So I guess for my question is, particularly on the gifts, is there any way that you will or awards? I forget what exactly it is, but on that section, is there any way you would confirm that it's actually going to not just like the staff of those organizations, but actually like members, or like being given away to who it's supposed to?
Sure. So I'd be happy to pass it off to Turner for a more hands-on approach, but I know that elsewhere in the funding regulations, there's an entire section for oversight matters. So the treasurer and their assistants are empowered at any time to request an organization's financial records, and even to attend events alongside the organization's members to ensure that funding is going where it should. Turner, do you have anything to add? Or sorry, Treasurer, do you have anything to add? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Turner, that's mainly just what's covered in the organization compliance policy, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh?
I can't say his name.
Oh, not you, because the podium, because that would be like face-to-face attacking, but then, yeah, from the dais, yes.
Yeah, so this was my main concern. Like, that's the reason that we capped it at $200, because if there's no cap there, then there can be some serious corruption that could happen. I capped it at 200 as like the first barrier, but there is that compliance part where if we want to know what they're actually spending it on, we can draw that. And also, I kind of trust people at KU that if they see something shady going, they'll let us know. And also, they have to mark in their bill what's going to giveaways. So I'm sure the finance council can tear that apart and maybe scare them before they think of doing stuff like that. But that's kind of my thought. I figured 200 is a good amount.
Oh yeah, a bit of drafting history. When I was first proposing this bill, I just did not have a limit for awards and giveaways. So collaboration with the treasurer, we felt this was a good way to ensure that not too much Senate money is going out for these. On balance, I feel that it's a good way to ensure that student groups can improve their engagement.
Any questions for the presenter? Question from David?
I don't necessarily agree with the giveaways. I think that's the use of student money, which, some people have jobs, so maybe they don't want to spend their money for other student organizations for them to get free shirts or something. I motion to amend to strike out giveaways and gift cards or anything like that. Keep it as what it is, but no giveaways.
Okay, so just to clarify, you want to keep subsection E here the same as it was before, in the current constitution, the same as it is?
Yes, I just don't think that we should be using student money for giveaways. If it requires you to, come to a student organization because you're getting something in exchange, do you really want to be part of that organization? That's just me.
I think that's a motion.
Yeah, there's a motion. A second from over here. What was your name again? Robert Epler? Yes. And is there anyone who objects to that amendment to this legislation? You object and Jeffrey objects? All right. And so seeing some objections and that the motion has been properly made and seconded, we are now going to go to a formal vote on whether the amendment will be considered as part of the legislation.
May I just speak briefly?
Yes, you may.
So I know that for some of the organizations that I've been a part of, we really wanted to have these sorts of giveaways. to improve our engagement. So for example, the gaming organization I'm vice president of out of the Center for Sexuality and Gender Diversity. We're planning on hosting like some gaming tournaments, and we really wanted to have like just some like a few cool prizes for the people who like play well, to encourage people to play and to like ensure that some of our people are getting some cool goodies. So like we had some enamel pride pins, like a stuffed shark that for some reason transgender people love. I cannot explain that, but it's real. So yeah, I know that my organizations have had a lot of trouble with engagement with this policy in place. I'm sure that other student organizations across campus are similarly frustrated that they can't have these sorts of like really engaging events where people walk away with something really cool to have to themselves.
Thank you for that, Chris. If that's the end of your presentation, you may be seated. Yes, we are going to be processing that, but I was going to ask, David, did you want to make a negative speech to cover like the reasoning for the amendment, or do you feel that that was pretty well brought?
Like, is a response to what you just said, or like?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll make one.
Okay, yeah, feel free to come up to the podium and then we can go ahead and grant you 2 minutes there. Holly?
Because in the International Affairs Committee of University Senate, a way we wanted to incentivize international students to fill out the survey was to have a giveaway, and we haven't yet got an answer back as to whether we're allowed to use state funds to actually do that. So I don't actually know if this is allowed.
In terms of that point of inquiry, I'll probably relay back to Dr. Katie Treadwell back there. I feel like she would have a lot more details related to that.
Really brief, unhelpful answer is it depends on the specific sources of that funding, how it's coming into the department, and then what the giveaway item is allocated for. So it depends in part on how we're describing the giveaway item. Is it truly a tool related to the program versus swag? And sometimes swag's allowed, sometimes not. So happy to look at specific instances and examples, but even across the departments that I support and supervise, they all have different rules based on what the program is and where the funds are coming from. So sorry, I can't give an easier answer.
Thank you for that.
Well, that just makes me wonder that it might just become like a straight up nightmare to try and enforce and like try and figure that out for the next treasurer.
Okay.
Just a thought. I'm not
Yeah,
saying it's
food
a
for
bad
thought.
idea, I'm just saying like you get different answers everywhere you go. So
Yes. All right, David, if you want to come up and make a next speech, we can go ahead and do that. And then we can proceed to voting on the amendment as stated, which I believe was just renewing the section, correct?
Yes.
Perfect.
Sadie, you wrote this, right? Oh, who wrote it? Oh, you wrote it. Okay. Sorry, I was thinking of your previous one. Well, I mean, honestly, like this is good. I actually like it, but I just don't like. I'm currently the president of Phi Alpha Delta, which is like the pre-law fraternity, and we wanted to do something like this. It was shot down in Senate, actually, surprisingly. But after like some reconsideration, I agreed with the people who had voted against it because I just don't think that we should be using student money to give out t-shirts and stuff like that. I feel like if you want to do something like that, your organization should do fundraising. You should reach out to companies or like local organizations. I just don't think we should be using student money for that. So I work full-time for CVS Pharmacy, and honestly, I don't want to use my money to buy t-shirts for other people. So I'd rather buy my own t-shirt.
Any questions for the presenter? Question from Chris?
Yes.
Oh.
Listen, I tried playing basketball. It really did not work. I'm not getting into it. Okay, so I completely understand your concerns with student money just going to like hand out t-shirts and stuff. I'm wondering how you square this with like, because we do already fund a lot of things that just kind of go out to students, like food, like we've given multiple thousands of dollars to food. And that just kind of goes out in the same way that like T-shirts do and other kind of swag. So I think I'm not really seeing the real distinction between that and the kind of stuff that would pass under this section or the revised section subsection.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
Okay. That's where I kind of disagree. I think the food is like, it's open to all students for that organization or whoever wants to go. It encourages students to come. There's food, you know, people don't have jobs or some people don't have enough money. So that provides them the opportunity to get free dinner, free lunch, and also learn something about whatever the organization is presenting. But I think when it comes to like T-shirts and keychains and swag like that has no real beneficial value other than an exchange. I see it as a transaction, like, oh, you came, so in exchange, you get a keychain. Like, I just don't think if you're really interested in that organization, you shouldn't require you to get something in exchange for it. So that's just me though. But-
We are currently out of time, so we would need a motion. Motion? 5 minutes, Farzad? Second? Cool. All right, anyone objects to 5-minute time extension? Seeing none, we will extend speaker's time.
How many people do you think would attend Senate meetings if we didn't have pizza?
Not many, but that's what I just said. Like the food provides that opportunity, but we don't give out keychains and T-shirts to people for attending Senate meetings.
Farzad seems to have a question. Farzad, would you be fine with Chris asking a follow-up?
I'm not seeing the distinction. My point was the transactional aspect that you were talking about. People attend the meetings because they want the T-shirts. It's a transaction. People attend meetings because they want the food. That's a transaction too.
Yeah, but like I said, it also provides students with like low-income students opportunities to get free food. Whereas a keychain, like what is a keychain going to do for anybody? I mean, honestly.
Okay.
All right, Farzad?
Sorry. Okay. It's more of a comment. So like there is a clause within our own government when it comes to like, or at least the principle of not taking gifts for the presidency. So that rule, if we want to mirror like what we did for the Speaker of the House position a few months ago, we want to follow that same mode of thought, maybe keeping the lack of gift taking would follow suit with that.
Like I 100% support like student orgs and like getting as much people as you can go. Like I understand, like even with like we struggle to get people to come, and the food is a good motivator. But I just don't think like exchanging gifts is like necessary for our use of money. So like we're already running low on money as it is in the unallocated account. So if we're handing out money for like free rewards, that gives less opportunity for less organizations. So.
All right, do we have any other questions on the floor? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, David. All right, so now we'll proceed to actually voting on the amendment, but first I am going to close the original vote we did have on Senate Bill 23-77. I assume everyone has finished, and so reading out the total there, we have 33 votes in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and 1 abstention, so that legislation clearly passes. All right, and now we'll get something into the chat to amend this legislation. And a reminder, this will require a simple majority vote just to amend the bill, but since it is a constitutional amendment, it must still pass with 2/3 of the chamber. That poll has now been posted in the Students Assembly channel. So vote yes if you agree that it should be reverted back into this text, and vote no if you believe it should be maintaining the same text that was put in the strike through. Oh, that's the. All right, has anyone not voted on this matter that has the ability to do so? All right, okay, I'm still seeing votes roll in, so please get your vote in the next 20 seconds, and then we'll proceed to close this vote. All right, is there anyone else who has not yet voted on this legislation? Seeing no objections, I'll move to close this vote. And with a vote of 26 in the affirmative, 8 in the negative, and 2 abstentions, this legislation clearly passes. Or this amendment clearly passes, sorry. Huh? No, the presentation ended with David giving the next speech for the amendment. Yeah. Now I'll just look for a motion to pass this legislation as is or any other amendments. Motion from Kevin. Motion to previous question, I imagine.
All right.
Yes, perfect. All right, and then Austin, I saw a second for previous question. All right, and is there anyone who objects to moving towards a vote on this last piece of legislation? I didn't think so. All right, so we will now go, do you approve Senate Bill 2023-76?
Did the women win?
Yeah.
Yeah, they killed.
Amazing.
Where we be there? We're going to win it. Robert, you read your rules? Robert's rules?
Brilliant. Okay, so do you agree with Senate Bill 23-76? Yes, if you do, no, if you do not, and abstain to stay out of the discussion. This requires a 2/3 vote to pass. If you want to get out soon, please get your vote in the next 20 seconds. Does anyone have any announcements before we close out the meeting as well? Solid. Holly? Is there anyone who has not yet voted on this legislation? Seeing none, we'll move to close this poll. And with a vote of 32 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, this legislation clearly passes. Do I see a motion from Evan? Yeah, well, yeah, motion second for adjournment. All right. And anyone objecting? We are adjourned.